Nah. The phone rang at 11:37 p.m. on a Tuesday in late October. I remember the time exactly because I'd been staring at the kitchen clock, the one my wife picked out before she passed, watching the second hand crawl. I couldn't sleep. Hadn't slept right in weeks, truthfully. Something in the house felt wrong, and I couldn't put my finger on what. When I saw my younger boy's name on the screen, my stomach dropped. He never called this late. He worked Homeland Security out of the Newark field office. And the kind of man who calls his father at midnight isn't calling to chat about the weather. "Pop, listen to me very carefully," he said. His voice was low, controlled, the way it gets when he's trying not to scare somebody. "I need you to turn off every light in that house, right now. Don't ask questions. Then I need you to walk down to the cellar and lock yourself in. And whatever you do, do not say a word to your son-in-law. Not one word." "Son, what's Pop? Please, I'm 40 minutes out. Just do it." "You're scaring me?" "Good. I want you scared. Move." I moved. I'm 71 years old. I spent 41 years as a steam fitter for the local in Pittsburgh, climbing scaffolds and crawling through boiler rooms and steel mills that don't exist anymore. I've broken 3 ribs, 2 fingers, and 1 collarbone, and I never once panicked. But that night, fumbling for light switches in my own house, my hands were shaking like I had palsy. I went down the cellar steps the way I used to walk into a job site at 4 in the morning. Quiet. Careful. The kind of quiet that lets you hear your own pulse. There's a small window down there, ground level, that looks out onto the side yard between my house and the Petrosky place next door. I crouched by it, because that's where my son told me to wait, and through that little smudged pane of glass, in the wash of the streetlight, I saw 2 men standing in my driveway. One of them was my son-in-law. The other one I'd never seen before. They were unloading something heavy from the trunk of a car that wasn't my son-in-law's. A long, canvas duffel, the kind a body would fit in. My blood turned to ice water. Let me back up. You need to understand how I got there. In my own cellar, hiding from a man who was supposed to be family. My daughter is my only girl. Her older brother is the one in Homeland Security. She came along 7 years after him. And I'll tell you the truth. She was the apple of my eye from the day we brought her home. Her mother and I tried for a long time to have another after our son, and when she finally arrived, we treated her like a small miracle. Maybe that was the first mistake. Maybe loving her that much was where everything started to go wrong. She married her husband 11 years ago. I didn't like him from the start. He had one of those handshakes that's all squeeze and no warmth, and a way of looking at you like he was figuring out how much you were worth. He sold commercial real estate, or said he did. Always had a deal closing next week. Always had a reason the deal didn't close. My wife, God rest her, used to say I was being too hard on him. He loves her, she'd say. That's what matters. My wife passed 2 years ago this past August, pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless. 83 days from diagnosis to the funeral. I didn't know a person could lose that much weight that quickly. I sat with her every night in that hospice bed and held her hand until it went cold, and afterward I didn't know what to do with myself in our house. 46 years of marriage. Every room held her. About 4 months after the funeral, my daughter came over with her husband and a tray of stuffed shells from the Italian place on Brownsville Road. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Daddy, we've been talking. We don't think you should be alone in this big old house. Now, the house isn't big. It's a 3-bedroom brick on 1/10 of an acre in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of house a steam fitter could afford in 1979 and pay off in 20 years. But I knew what she meant. She meant alone with grief. Alone with her mother's clothes still hanging in the closet because I couldn't bring myself to bag them up. "We want to move in for a while," she said, "just to help. Cook for you. Keep you company. Until you get your feet back under you." I should have said no. I knew, even then, somewhere in the back of my head, that I should say no. But she was sitting there with her mother's eyes, and my house was so quiet at night. I could hear the refrigerator hum from across the kitchen, and I missed my wife so bad my chest hurt. I said yes. They moved in 6 weeks later. Brought a U-Haul's worth of stuff. My son-in-law set himself up in what used to be my workshop in the garage, said he needed a home office for his business. I said, fine. My daughter took over the kitchen, the laundry, the grocery list. At first it was nice. The smell of coffee in the morning when I came downstairs. Somebody to watch the news with. A reason to put on a clean shirt. But things started shifting, and I couldn't tell you exactly when. The first thing I noticed was the cameras. My son-in-law said it was for security, for my safety. He installed one over the front door, one at the back door, one in the kitchen, one in the living room. Even one in the upstairs hallway pointed right at my bedroom door. It's smart home technology, Pop, he said. Top of the line. We can see if you fall, if anything happens. He called me Pop, by the way. He'd never called me that before. Started doing it about a month after they moved in, like he was practicing the word. Then it was my mail. My daughter started bringing it in for me. Said the mailbox was on the way back from her morning walk anyway. Pretty soon I noticed I wasn't seeing my bank statements anymore. My credit card bill stopped arriving. When I asked, she said, "Oh, Daddy, we set up paperless. It's all online now. Hubby's handling the bill so you don't have to worry about it." I hadn't agreed to any of that. Then my old buddies stopped coming around. I had a Wednesday night card game I'd been part of for 30-some years. 5 guys from the local played pinochle and drank Iron City and complained about our knees. One Wednesday, I came down to find my daughter at the door telling Mickey Halloran I wasn't feeling up to company tonight. Mickey looked at me over her shoulder, and I looked at him. And I could see in his face that this wasn't the first time. He just nodded and said, "Take it easy, bud." My phone calls got monitored, too. My daughter would happen to walk into the room every time the phone rang. Hover. Listen. If it was my son or my buddies or my brother down in Florida, she'd find a reason to interrupt. "Daddy, the doctor's office is on the other line." There was no other line. We had one phone. I started feeling foggy. That's the only word for it. Foggy. I'd lose track of conversations. I'd go upstairs and forget why. I'd find myself standing in front of the open refrigerator at 3 in the afternoon, with no idea what I came in for. My daughter started saying things like, "Daddy, are you feeling okay? You seem confused lately." She started writing things down. "I'm just keeping a little log, Daddy, for your doctor. I want you to understand something. I'm a man who can still rebuild a carburetor blindfolded. I can still do the books for the Union Widows Fund in my head. I am not a confused old man, but by Christmas time, I was starting to wonder if I was losing my marbles. And that was when I missed my wife the most, because she would have known. She would have looked at me and said, 'Bud, something is not right here.' And I would have believed her. In February, my son came to visit on a Sunday, drove down from Jersey with his wife and the grandkids. We had pot roast. My daughter cooked. Everything was very pleasant on the surface. But I caught my son watching me, watching her, watching my son-in-law. He's got the same look his mother had when she was working something out in her head. When everybody was getting their coats on, he hugged me at the door, and as he was hugging me, he said into my ear, very quiet, "Pop, I need you to do something for me. Tomorrow morning, walk down to the Sunoco station on Library Road. Use the payphone outside. Call this number." He pressed a folded slip of paper into my back pocket while he was hugging me. "Don't tell anybody. Not anybody. Promise me." "Promise," I said. The next morning, I told my daughter I was going to walk to the bakery for a loaf of rye. She frowned and said it was cold out and offered to drive me. I said I wanted the air. I said it firm enough that she let it go. I walked the 8 blocks to the Sunoco. My hands were so cold I could barely punch the numbers. He picked up on the second ring. Pop, listen to me. Some things are about to make sense, and I need you to stay calm. About 4 months ago, I started getting flagged communications about your son-in-law. He's been under federal scrutiny for a while. He's not in commercial real estate, Pop. Or he is, but not the legal kind. He's been involved in a deed and title fraud operation that's been working 3 states. They identify isolated elderly homeowners. They get themselves into the position of caretaker or family member, and then they manufacture documents that allow them to take ownership or take out massive equity loans against properties the elderly person doesn't even know are being borrowed against. We've got him on at least 9 other victims. We didn't know he'd married into a family until I saw him at Christmas with Sissy. I about put my fork through the table. I leaned my forehead against the cold metal of the payphone enclosure. The thing is, Pop, he's not just doing the financial side. There's a guy he works with, a partner. We don't have a name yet. And in 2 of the previous cases, the elderly homeowners ended up dead. One was ruled a fall. One was ruled a heart attack. We have reason to believe neither of those rulings were correct. I couldn't speak. Pop, I need to know. Has anyone been in your house that wasn't family? Has Sissy been giving you anything new to take? Vitamins, supplements, anything? I thought about the fog. The forgetting. The way I'd started napping in the afternoons, something I'd never done in my life. The way my daughter had set up that little plastic pill organizer on the kitchen counter and filled it for me every Sunday. For your blood pressure, Daddy, the doctor said. I hadn't been to the doctor in 8 months. Pop? Yeah, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Yeah, she gives me pills. He was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he said. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to keep taking those pills, but you're not actually going to take them. You're going to put them under your tongue, walk into the bathroom, and spit them in the toilet. Every single one. Starting today. And you're going to act exactly the same. Foggy. Tired. Confused. You can do that. I can do that. I'm working with a colleague at the bureau. We're going to need a couple of weeks to build this. Can you give me 2 weeks, Pop? I can give you whatever you need. I love you, Pop. I love you too, son. I walked home with a loaf of rye bread under my arm and my whole life shaking inside my chest. My daughter was waiting at the door. You were gone a long time, Daddy. I said the line was long at the bakery and I'd run into Sully Mackin. There was no Sully Mackin. There hadn't been a Sully Mackin in 15 years. She nodded and took the bread. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life, and the hardest acting job a man ever did. I took the pills out of the organizer in front of her, swallowed water in front of her, and the second I was out of the cam's line of sight in the upstairs bathroom, I spit them into the toilet bowl and watched them swirl away. Within 4 days, the fog started lifting. Within a week, I felt sharper than I had in months. I had to actively pretend to forget things. I had to pretend to nap. It was exhausting in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I started watching them. Really watching the way you watch something you don't trust. I noticed that my son-in-law made phone calls in the garage with the door closed. I noticed that he and my daughter would have whispered conversations in the kitchen that stopped when I walked in. I noticed a stack of papers on his desk one afternoon when he ran out for cigarettes, and one of those papers had my signature on it. A signature I had never given. A power of attorney granting him full authority over my financial affairs, dated 3 months prior. I noticed something else. My daughter had been crying in the upstairs bathroom. Quietly, with the water running, but I could hear it through the heat register. She came down with red eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. I felt sorry for her. Whatever this was, she was in over her head. She knew it. And she was too far in to climb out. That didn't change what I had to do. The night my son called, I had been waiting for him to call for 10 days. We had a code worked out. If he said the word Tuesday, it meant get out of the house. Cellar meant lock yourself in. "Don't tell" meant my daughter was not to be trusted that night either. He used all three. So, I sat in the dark of my own cellar, on the bottom step, in the workshop my son-in-law had pushed me out of, and I watched two men unload a duffel from a strange car. I watched them carry it toward the side door. I heard the door open above me. I heard footsteps on the kitchen floor. I heard my son-in-law say, in a voice he had never used in front of me, "He's upstairs. He's out cold by 10 every night now. We've got at least 6 hours." I heard my daughter say, "Wait, please, just wait. Let me check on him first." "There's nothing to check. The pills do their job. Stop being weak about this. He's my father. He's a payday, and we are running out of time." I heard her footsteps on the stairs going up to my bedroom. I heard them stop outside my door. I heard nothing for a long time. And then I heard her come back down, and I heard her say, very quiet, "He's asleep." He hadn't checked. She had. And she had lied to him. I don't know what I would have done with that information later. I don't know if it would have changed anything. But I know that in that moment, sitting on those cellar steps, I cried into my own hand, because my daughter had still, at the very last moment, tried to give me a chance. The federal agents came through both doors at 12:34 a.m. I know the time because my son told me afterward. They had a warrant. They had been watching the house for 9 days from the Petroskits attic, with the Petroskitsarches' permission. God bless them. They took my son-in-law down in the front hall. They took the other man, the partner, in the kitchen. He had a gun on him. The duffel they'd brought in had a tarp, lengths of rope, 2 cinder blocks, and a bottle of liquid that the lab later identified as a concentrated solution that, in a man my age with my blood pressure, would have caused what looked exactly like a heart attack. My daughter, they took in the kitchen too. She was sitting at the table with her hands flat on the wood, and when they told her to put her hands behind her back, she did it without a word. My son told me later she'd been crying when he came in. Just sitting there crying when he came in. I came up out of the cellar when my son called down the stairs. I walked through my own kitchen, past 3 federal agents, and a man in handcuffs who had been calling me Pop for 2 years, and I didn't look at him. I looked at my daughter. She looked back. She didn't say anything, and I didn't either. There wasn't anything to say. The next 6 months were a blur of statements and depositions and hearings. My son-in-law was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, federal wire fraud, deed and title fraud, and a string of other things that added up to the rest of his natural life, if the prosecutor got her way. The partner had a record going back to the 90s and had been the actual trigger man in the previous 2 deaths. They charged him as the principal in the murders. My daughter was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory after the fact, but not with the murder counts. The prosecutor told me, sitting across from me in a small conference room, that they did not believe my daughter had known about the killing. They believed she had known about the fraud, the pills, the isolation, the power of attorney. She had known her father was being slowly drugged into incompetence so that her husband could take everything. But the murder, no. The prosecutor said, "Sir, I want to be honest with you. We think she didn't know it was going to go that far. We think when she found out, she froze. What does that mean for her? It means she's looking at 5 to 7, probably. With cooperation, maybe less." My daughter took a plea. 4 years, with the possibility of parole at 2.5. She testified against her husband. She told the courtroom, with her voice barely audible, that she had loved her father and had still let this happen. She said the word weak about herself 11 times. I counted. I sat in the courtroom every day. My son sat beside me. We didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. Her husband got life without parole. The partner got life without parole, plus an additional 50 years for the previous murders. They will both die in federal prison, and that is the only outcome I could live with. The day my daughter was sentenced, I drove home alone. My son had offered to come with me, but I needed to be by myself for a little while. I sat in my driveway in my old truck for about 20 minutes before I went inside. The cameras had all been taken down. The house was quiet. My wife's coat was still on the hook by the back door. because I had never moved it. I sat at the kitchen table where I had eaten thousands of meals with my wife and a few hundred meals with my daughter and her husband. And I cried for a long time. Not the way you cry at a funeral, the way you cry when you finally let yourself feel something you've been holding for years. I'm 71 years old. I have buried a wife I loved more than my own life. I have watched my daughter walk into a courtroom in handcuffs. I have stood in my own cellar and listened to a man I welcomed into my home tell another man that I was a payday. And I'm still here. I sold the house 6 months later. Couldn't stay. Bought a small ranch over on the south side, near where my son's family comes through when they drive in. I built a workshop in the garage, smaller than my old one, and I started fixing things again. Not clocks. Lawnmowers. Small engines. Mostly for the neighbors who can't afford a shop. I don't charge much. Sometimes I don't charge anything. It gives me something to do with my hands. My daughter writes me from the women's facility in Cambridge Springs. The first letter came about 3 months in. 2 pages, handwritten, the kind of letter you write when you've been sitting alone with your own thoughts for a long time, and you don't have anywhere left to hide. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She told me about her cellmate, a woman who had killed her own husband after 30 years of beatings. She told me she had started reading again, the way she had when she was a girl. She told me she thought about her mother every day and was grateful her mother had not lived to see it. I didn't write back for a long time. About 14 months. The first letter I sent her was 3 sentences. I wrote, "I got your letters. I haven't read most of them yet. I will when I'm ready." I didn't sign it, Daddy. I didn't sign it anything. I just put my name. She wrote back the next week. Just 2 sentences. "Thank you. Take your time." That was almost 2 years ago now. We're up to about a letter a month. She'll be out next spring, if her parole goes the way it should. I don't know yet whether I'll see her when she gets out. I'm not pretending to know. Some men in my position would say they'll never speak to that daughter again, and I respect that, and I understand it. Some men would say, of course they'll forgive, that's what fathers do, and I respect that too. I'm somewhere in the middle, and I don't think there's a name for where I am. I think I love her, and I don't trust her, and I'm not sure those 2 things have to settle their argument right away. I think I am allowed to take as long as I need. What I know for sure is this. You can love a person with your whole heart and still lock the door against them. Love is not a key. Love is not a deed. Love is not a power of attorney. My wife used to say that the only person responsible for an old man is the old man. And I didn't understand what she meant until I was sitting in my own cellar, watching strangers carry rope and cinder blocks into my kitchen. I should have said no when my daughter asked to move in, not because I didn't love her, because I did. Loving somebody doesn't mean handing them the keys to your life. It means being honest enough to tell them what you can and can't give. I forgot that for 2 years. It almost cost me everything. If you're an older fellow listening to this, or an older woman, and somebody in your life is asking you to give up a little bit of your own decision-making, a little bit of your own mail, a little bit of your own phone, a little bit of your own fence, a little bit of your own friends, a little bit of your own pills, I am asking you, please, pay attention. You are not being paranoid. You are not being difficult. You are not being a bad parent or a bad grandparent. You are being a person. And a person gets to decide what happens in their own house. I sit in my workshop most evenings now, with the radio on low, working on whatever's on the bench. The neighbors' kids come by sometimes to watch. I show them how a small engine breathes, the way my own father showed me when I was 8 years old in a garage in Carrick that doesn't exist anymore. Some things get passed down. Some things get taken. The trick is knowing the difference and being awake enough to tell. It's late now. The light through the workshop window has that orange color it gets in October. The same color it had on the night the phone rang. I think about that night more than I'd like to. I think about how close I came. I think about my son driving 90 miles an hour up I-79 with his hand on the steering wheel and his radio crackling with federal agents, converging on his father's house. I think about my daughter sitting at my kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood, choosing not to fight. Mostly, I think about my wife and what she would have said. I think she would have put her hand on my arm, the way she did when she wanted me to listen, and she would have said, "Bud, you did what you had to do. Now do the harder thing. Keep living." So that's what I do. I keep living. I fix the small engines. I write the occasional letter. I lock my own doors. I take my own pills, the real ones. And I don't let anyone else fill the organizer. And every now and then, when the phone rings late at night, I still feel that old cold drop in my stomach. I probably always will. But I answer it, because somewhere out there is a son who once drove 90 miles an hour through the dark to save his father's life. And if he ever needs me to do the same for him, I want to be the kind of man who picks up. That's the whole story. That's everything. Thank you for sitting with me through it. I've thought a lot, in the years since that October night, about how a man ends up sitting in his own cellar at midnight, hiding from people he raised and people he welcomed in. It didn't happen all at once. It happened the way a slow leak ruins a basement, one small thing at a time, and you don't notice until the foundation is soft. The truth is, I built that night myself, brick by brick. Every time I said yes when I should have said no. I said yes to my daughter moving in because I was lonely and grieving and didn't want to feel my wife's absence in every empty room. I said yes to the cameras because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I said yes to the pill organizer because it felt nice to be cared for. Each yes was small. Each yes was understandable. Together they almost killed me. That's the honest part nobody warns you about when you get older. Loneliness is not a small thing. Loneliness will negotiate with you. It will tell you that some help is better than no help, that some company is better than empty rooms, that you can hand over a little bit of your life and still own the rest. Loneliness lies. The minute you start handing over pieces of your own decision-making, you've taught the people around you that the rest is up for grabs. I don't believe my daughter set out to hurt me. I believe she married a man who saw a road and walked her down it, and by the time she understood where the road went, she was too far in to turn back. That's not an excuse for her. She made every choice she made. But it taught me something I wish I'd known at 40. Decency without a spine is just compliance. You can be kind and still draw a line. In fact, kindness without a line isn't really kindness. It's an invitation. I think about my son driving up I-79 that night, and I think about what it cost him to make the call he made. He had to choose between his sister and his father. He chose right, and he chose hard, and he chose without hesitating. That's character. Character is what you do when the easy thing and the right thing are pulling in different directions, and you can feel both of them in your chest at the same time. If I have anything to leave behind that matters more than the house or the truck or the tools, it's this. Pay attention to the small yeses. Keep your own keys. Open your own mail. Pour your own coffee in the morning. Love your children with everything you have, and still let them know there are doors they don't get to walk through without knocking. I'm 71. I'm not bitter. I'm awake. There's a difference. And the difference is the whole rest of my life.